has to ask itself whether we are willing to roll the dice too. I'll now turn to our ranking member for any opening comments he may have.
Thank you, Chairman Royce. I appreciate the Chairman's continued focus on making sure that this committee gets the opportunity to thoroughly discuss and debate the merits of this newly announced agreement with Iran. I know once the final deal is submitted to Congress, the Chairman and Ranking Member will move quickly to set up briefings and hearings as we move forward toward a vote on the deal. In the 18 months since the P5+1 began negotiating with Iran in an effort to prevent it from acquiring nuclear weapons, we've had a lot of discussions about centrifuges and stockpiles and breakout times. And we now know basically what an agreement looks like in terms of infrastructure. But we still await details as to exactly what kind of access IAEA investigators will get, how potential violations will be dealt with, how the so-called snapback mechanism will work, and what a new UN Security Council resolution will look like. Secretary Kerry and his team have spent an enormous amount of time and energy on these negotiations, and I applaud their commitment to diplomacy, and I appreciate their ability to negotiate significant limitations on enrichment and nuclear stockpiles. I hesitate to speculate on the deal as a whole until we receive all of the details. I do have some serious concerns, however, about various aspects of the deal which were extensively reported from Vienna this week. In particular, one, Iran's need to come clean on its past nuclear activities. Two, its access to all suspected nuclear sites. Three, the timing of sanctions relief and the impact on the region. And four, ensuring that an arms embargo remains in place to prevent the spread of weapons to terrorists. First, along with most of my colleagues, I've been very clear from the outset that Iran must come clean on its past nuclear weapons work, a demand repeatedly made by the administration. Yet, as has been the case for years, Iran has been unwilling throughout these negotiations to cooperate with the IAEA on its parallel investigation into the possible military dimensions of its program. Iran's intransigence has made it difficult for many of us to imagine how we could expect Iran to comply with the terms of a deal. If they've stonewalled the IAEA for a decade, will they continue to find ways to do so under the comprehensive deal, or will a deal make that impossible? This is why upholding the integrity of the IAEA's PMD investigation is so vital right now. So I will await details as to exactly what the new roadmap signed by Iran and the IAEA will entail. Further, I'm concerned about access. We're told this agreement is not based on trust, it's based on transparency and verification. So I wait to see in greater detail how the final agreement deals with resolving IAEA access to suspected sites. Will we have the access we need, or will Iran be able to block inspectors? If media reports are correct, and one visit to Parchin, will that be enough to gather the information needed? How far have we strayed from the anytime, anywhere inspections that the experts had said should be part of any deal? Third, I remain concerned about the timing and implications of sanctions relief. How extensive are the nuclear-related steps that Iran has to take in order to receive relief? How will stonewalling or suspected cheating on its commitments be dealt with? And will Iran have access to its frozen assets, well over $100 billion, all at once, and by what date? And where does the money go? I know that this was touched on last week in part one of this hearing. Iran's behavior is not going to change as part of this agreement. That's something that's been acknowledged. In fact, Iran's support for nefarious regional actors and designated terrorist organizations has the potential to grow under any deal. And while it's true that some of the sanctions relief will have to go toward fixing domestic economic problems, one can imagine the havoc that Iran's terror proxies could wreak with even $1 billion more. This needs to be something that we understand better. And that brings me to my fourth and perhaps most troubling concern, which emerged as a sticking point in the final days of negotiations, the lifting of the UN arms embargo. Now, I understand that international sanctions are intertwined and they're complex. And I understand that there is a current disagreement among the P5+1 and Iran as to what constitutes a nuclear sanction. But it's extraordinarily difficult to imagine that the UN Security Council resolution that will result from the comprehensive agreement will not continue the existing restrictions on Iran's ability to export dangerous and military hardware to its terror proxies for many years to come. Quite frankly, the apparent resolution of this issue in some ways is baffling to me. Why do we believe that Iran's dangerous support for terror groups will change in 5 years, or that its desire for ballistic missile technology will wane in 8 years? From the beginning, the administration has said that it's dealing with the nuclear issue separate from our other issues with this regime, whether meddling in neighboring countries, its holding of American or its sponsorship of terrorism, which will be dramatically more dangerous when the arms embargo is lifted. And finally, I want to again raise the issue of the 4 American citizens held or missing in Iran: Jason Rezaian, Saeed Abedini, Amir Hekmati, and my constituent, Robert Levinson, the longest-held American in history. Regardless of what transpired in Vienna this week, Iran must know that the United States will never stop working for the release of our citizens. I applaud and I thank the committee for its commitment to seeing these innocent Americans return to their families. I appreciate the efforts of our negotiators to raise the issue. And members of this committee and all members of Congress should have these Americans in their thoughts as they review the terms of this agreement. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to receiving the details this week so that members can begin to evaluate its merits. The agreement can't just be judged on what would happen in the absence of a deal today or tomorrow or 60 days from now. It must also be analyzed by what will happen under an agreement in 5 years, in 8 years, in 10 years, and beyond. The measure of this deal will be whether the national security interests of our nation and that of our allies will be strengthened for decades to come. And I look forward to a meaningful discussion and analysis of these issues in the days and weeks ahead. And I yield.